good evening, everybody. It's so lovely to have you join us. My name is Chris Gordon. I am the Programming Manager for Readings. Tonight, I am delighted to be able to bring you a conversation between two best-selling YA authors, Juno Dawson and Alison Evans. But before I do that, before I introduce Alison, I would like us all to take a moment out of our busy, busy day and just reflect. Wherever we are in Australia, we're living in one of the most beautiful countries in the entire world. But of course, it's not our land. It's owned by the First Nations people. This is land that's not been ceded yet. I'm at the moment speaking from the Kulin Nation, and on behalf of everyone that's listening right now, I want to pay my respects and indeed my deepest gratitude to their elders past, present and future. It seems to me that we can learn so much from the songs and the storylines that these First Nations people have given us. And it means that we can continue on telling stories and making sense of who we are. And of course, that brings me to the delightful position of introducing Alison Evans. Of course, an award-winning YA novelist, someone who has been a commentator in world affairs, in queer culture, and is indeed a great friend of readings. Alison, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm very excited to be here. I am also on the land of the Kulin Nation, specifically the Wurundjeri people. And I'm going to introduce Juno for us. So Juno Dawson is the author, most recently, of What's the Tea? She also has done many, many nonfiction books, as well as the best-selling YA trilogy, Clean, Meat Market, and Wonderland. So thank you, Juno, for having a little chat with me.
Thank you. Yes, I'm speaking to you from a very, very rainy United Kingdom. It's 10 o'clock in the morning here. And I must say, talking to you this way is much easier than getting on a plane for 24 hours. So at least it's easy. It's not ideal, but at least it's easy.
That's right. All right, so What's the Tea is Juno's latest book. In a nutshell, I'd say this is quite a large nutshell. It's a guide to everything trans. It's a glimpse into what trans life is like. It's a way of connecting with younger or like newer, I guess, for want of a better word, trans people. There's a handy parents guide or caregiver's guide at the back. You've packed a lot into this book. It's also a quick guide to some trans history. Can you tell me a little bit about why you wrote it? What was the motivation there?
And because I was so angry. I think the amazing YA author Patrick Ness once said that there is nothing like anger for making you a better writer. And I mean, I know there are issues in Australia as well, but I mean, I can't really convey to the Australian readers how toxic the situation is in the United Kingdom at the moment. We're almost daily in the British tabloids, which are notoriously perhaps the most savage in the world anyway. For the last 3 years, I mean, I came out about 6 years ago now. You know, it's gotten worse. You know, you would imagine as trans visibility improved in the media that, you know, the kind of stories we read about ourselves in the tabloids would reflect that, but they haven't. You know, not a day really goes by where we don't read something very scary or scaremongering in the tabloids about how, you know, kind of children are being converted by some sinister trans cult, or, you know, court cases about hormone blockers and, you know, just sort of wildly disproportionate reporting. And even where there is an attempt at balance, trans lives are still very much presented as a debate. You know, sort of like you'll turn on the breakfast news and you'll have some poor trans person versus just some religious fanatic who is saying, you know, trans people aren't real or something. And I felt so ground down and so defeated and very powerless. And I was like, well, I don't know what can I do to try make things better? Because if things are scary for you as a 38-year-old trans woman, then things must be really scary for a 15-year-old trans kid in Hull. So I was like, right, if you were one of the X-Men, you know, you have one power. you write books. You can't do anything else. I'm not a politician. I'm not a church leader. I'm not a community leader, but I can do this one thing. I have like this one gift, and it was time to use it. So that's why, my most recent novel, Wonderland, for the first time has a trans main character. And also I knew there was a potential there. What's the Tea is the companion book to a book called This Book is Gay, which has done phenomenally well all around the world. And I know that book has found its way to the right kids because I get emails and tweets and Instagram messages and all kinds of things from all around the world saying, oh my gosh, thank you. This book has helped me to understand who I am. It's helped me to have conversations with my parents. And so I thought, well, now it's time to do the trans remix. It's time to, literally take the T from LGBTQ and give it its own book, because at the moment, certainly in the United Kingdom, the conversations around the T part of LGBTQ are where the problem is at. And off I went. So that was how it began. So yeah, I was just really angry.
Yeah, I can sense that, but it's also, like in your writing, but it's also a really patient book. I think, especially when you talk about transphobia, because I think it's so easy for transphobes to kind of latch onto the anger and be like, oh, she's attacking us. And I don't know, like it's quite astounding how you managed to draw us in with like a really nice voice. It's really comforting, but it's also very like, you can tell this is for a trans audience. And I really, I don't know, it's just a very good work of art, I think, in that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and that was in collaboration with my lovely editor, Liza, as well. And I remember we had a meeting quite early on where we wanted this book as much as possible to be airtight. Mm-hmm. So there was, I will admit, in the early days, there was a much swearier version of this book. but we were like, no, let's take out every last swear word, because we don't want any criticism. We don't want to give anyone a reason to take this book out of a school library. So there is nothing controversial in this book unless you're transphobic. Mm-hmm. And it was quite deliberately designed that way. But it's also, I had to kind of go back and read This Book is Gay again and kind of remind myself of that kind of sisterly, that big sister tone, which was kind of always the goal, which is, I'm not claiming to be the expert on all things trans, but, I'm a bit older, I've been through it, I've got lots of friends who've been through it. And I remember, because I'm an eldest sibling, so I didn't have any older siblings, but I remember how, when my mum used to go out, she would get babysitters who were like 15 or 16-year-old girls. And, I would hang on every word they said, because there is just something about sort of the wisdom of your elders, even if your elders is like 4 years older than you. And I think so that's kind of what I want this book to be. It's kind of, I'm not, very aware that the situation politically is rapidly changing. We've already had to delay this book once. So it can't, and it never will be like the ultimate Bible, for want of a better phrase. But it was more just kind of that sense of sisterhood or solidarity, of community. And yes, life is quite tough out there if you are a young trans and or non-binary person. So the last thing I wanted this book to feel was furious, because actually the world is furious. So you don't need your friends to be.
Yeah. I think what I really liked was that you did ask your friends to kind of write some stuff for it. There's a Trans Hall of Fame where you do little bios. How did you pick those people? Because I feel like I'm surrounded by really beautiful, amazing trans people, and I'm like, I just want to talk about them all the time. How did you manage to get a short list down?
Well, I mean, basically everyone I spoke to is kind of in there. Some people were just too busy, which is, when you're approaching actors and writers and business people, not everybody who I asked could participate, but pretty much everybody did, even if it was just I was sliding into DMs left, right, and centre and just saying, do you have, what do you think made you trans, or kind of, just little sort of snippets. And the goal of that was, although I think the internet does this is the good part of the internet, is, that sense of making you feel like you're not the first and only person to go through this. And, I came out really, really late, but there's no doubt in my mind now that if I had been 20 years younger, I would have come out in childhood, because I would have realized that I was not the first and only person to desperately wish they could change gender. And so I think the purpose of asking all my friends to sort of participate, it was twofold. One, they're very smart, and two, just they make up the numbers, and they very visibly send a message to the audience, which is you're really not alone, and there is no need to feel isolated, because there are, trans people, a very, very tiny minority, which I think, you can't stress enough. You'd think we were much bigger in numbers due to the reaction to our community, but no, actually a tiny little minority, but still a community. And there is still, there are enough of us in the world for it not to be particularly unusual or even notable. And I really do think that is the goal, of trans liberation at the moment, is just to make ourselves really boring, because actually it is.
Yeah. I really like how you've got your mum in there and you've got your fiance who might now be your husband. I'm not sure.
COVID messed with that one. Yes. So no, we've had to move the wedding twice. So
yes. Third date is a charm.
Well, fingers crossed. It's supposed to be July now, but
yeah,
who can say?
Yeah. Well, I hope that does happen. But it is, I think, really important to show happy trans people and just trans people having lives. It's not all doom and gloom. As much as I love a good angsty novel, like, they don't all need to be that. And I think something you just touched on there, that it is quite boring. There was a quote in there, I don't think I wrote it down, but it was like, no one chooses to be trans or non-binary, but people do choose to think, sorry, I'm just going to start again. No one chooses to be trans or non-binary, but people do choose to be transphobic. Think about it. Why would anyone choose a life with this much bloody admin?
I mean, it's difficult because, I'm very mindful of having words taken out of context. But, from a sort of admin point of view, from a practical point of view, not an emotional point of view, but from a practical point of view, it would have been far easier for me to stay at home and not bother. Mm-hmm. I would have been really sad and a bit unfulfilled for the rest of my life, but the world would have carried on turning. There was a period where things, now my mum is really cool, but there was a period where my mum was desperately anxious about the whole thing. Mm. And I felt really guilty about that. And I think, I suspect other trans and non-binary people do as well, because, what you're doing is to save yourself. It's something that you have to do for you, but it can also be quite destructive to those around you. And this, you don't enter into it, giddily, kind of like, psych, mum, you'll never guess what, you've got to call me Juno now, lol. Nobody has ever done that. I think I love this idea that, it's kind of like that people are, transitioning for attention, or kind of for sort of like to make a statement or something. It's just, this is, something that comes up in the book a lot, which is just the same old arguments, the same conversations that people had around gay and lesbian people in the 90s, are just regurgitated in 2021 for trans people, kind of.
Yeah. I think you mentioned in it that some bits were quite hard to write. Either because they were boring or you've been through them so many times. But what were some of your favourite bits to write? What were the things that were the best one?
So the bits that I didn't have to write. Genuinely, there was something so wonderful about when, you know, you would get your email alert and you would go in and it would be like Christine Burns or Sean Fay or, you know, just any of the amazing people, Travis Alabanza that we've got in the book. And you're just like, oh, brilliant, kind of just get that straight in. And each one felt like a different flavour that I really, really loved. And also the first time I saw Sufia's illustrations as well, which was quite, I mean, I don't have many illustrated titles, but the ones that are illustrated, there is something so singular about the first time you get those illustrations, and they really bring a text to life, especially a non-fiction text. So a big, big shout out to Suf, because they're great. And Suf's done this whole bit in the middle about, there's like a little interlude about having facial hair that I thought was amazing.
Yeah, I really liked that. It was a nice like tone breaker. Well, not tone breaker, but like just a little interlude that was really beautiful. Did you get any say into the design of the book? Like when you were writing it, did you think, oh, this would be a good pull quote, or like how did that happen?
A bit. I mean, that's very not my forte, and I've done one sort of big format non-fiction book and I found it quite difficult because as soon as people started talking about layout, I'm going to stop you there because I don't understand what you're saying at all. But what I do, there are some bits that I will put in like a text box. I'll put in great big bold capital letters, which signals to the designer that this is something that needs to be set out of the main text. But usually, to be honest, it's almost intuitive. So it's not even something that you need to particularly point out to your editor or to your designer. They can kind of see what you've tried to do from the way you've broken up the text. Yes. So it's not really my skill set. And, you know, when I open those PDFs, like everyone, I'm just as blown away as everyone else. I love the way it's all been designed. I think it looks gorgeous.
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. And I especially love the cover and the spot glass. I don't know if people can see that, but it's very good. You should all go and buy a copy. I'm
going to do a shout out to my former publisher, because this is so lovely. It's like when your parents get divorced but still really get along with each other. So this book is gay actually belongs to a different publisher in both the UK and Australia. And when I first sat down with my new publisher to talk about What's the Tea, I was like, look, I don't care how you have to do it, but it needs to have the same cover as This Book is Gay. Like, This Book is Gay, we've just updated it to have the more modern interpretation of the pride flag with the black and brown and trans stripes as well.
Yeah, cool.
The original This Book is Gay cover was the old school pride flag with the 6 stripes. And I was like, it needs to look the same. I don't know if we're going to get sued. I don't know if my former publisher are going to have an issue with this, but I really do want them to match. They are a pair, they are companions. And hats off to both of my publishers, not an ill word. They were just like, cool, yeah, let's do it. And so it shows cooperation benefits everyone. There you go.
Yeah, that's lovely. It's always nice when things kind of like click together.
I love it when a pun comes together.
Yeah. And was that always the title? Or did you go through a few? Or
No, and it was, again, just painting myself to sound like a monster. I was quite insistent about the title. They did do some crowdsourcing, because This Book is Gay worked so well. And What's the Tea? Obviously, it works on so many levels. What's the truth? What is the tea in LGBTQ? And so I was like, no, this is we're not calling it anything else. It's called What's the Tea? There was a little concern among some people at my publisher that people might not know the double meaning, kind of, all the sort of, and I was like, oh, come on, everyone has seen RuPaul's Drag Race, even if it's just, you know, when you turn on the TV in the United Kingdom, one of the platforms has RuPaul's Drag Race on it. And I think they did a little bit of research. They actually reached out to some young adults and were like, if we were to say the phrase, what's the tea? And they all knew what it meant. So I was vindicated.
Very good. Excellent. Speaking of teens, was your main, like your dream audience, was that like you as a teenager, or like a teenager you've met, or did you have a dream audience in mind, or were you just...
Yeah, and I think, again, it was seeing the difference This Book Is Gay has made. And, in the before times, BC, I was, very lucky to be able to visit high schools all the time. And what would traditionally happen is you would do your big speech, then there would be a nice queue of kids lining up to get their books signed. And then right at the end, like these 3 or 4 really shy kids would wait for everybody else to leave, and then they would shuffle forward with their well-read, like falling apart copies of This Book Is Gay, where they have been read to death, and so I know, that there is such a power to seeing yourself in print. And, people coming up to me and saying they'd never seen the word asexual written down or the word demisexual written down, and what a difference that meant to them. And especially in the United Kingdom at the moment, trans kids are talked about constantly, but never spoken to. Inches and inches and inches of cisgender columnists just giving us opinions around trans children, but never once speaking to trans youth. And so, I guess I aimed this book at those 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old trans kids, but who, when there is so much misinformation around trans lives, I think this is a book that is going to benefit teachers, librarians, cisgender allies and friends, family members, and it's especially important as well for it not to be in kind of like dry academic language. I mean, there is so much written, and if an adult person was coming to me, I might recommend something by Meg John Barker or, Christine Burns, Trans Britain. But for that age group, I felt it was time to address them directly.
Yeah, and I think that really shows. Like, it still spoke to me as an adult, but I think definitely you can feel that respect for teens coming through in your writing.
Thanks. I mean, yeah, that's something that I've led with since my first novel, really, which was, when I was a teenager, I felt really powerfully clever. And actually, as I entered adulthood, I realized I was actually quite stupid. But actually, me and my friends, when we were teenagers, we were really challenging ourselves and really pushing ourselves culturally in that much more so then than now. We were watching foreign cinema and reading books in translation, reading classics. I remember at about 16 years old attempting to read Dangerous Liaisons in French with like an A at GCSE French, kind of like ambitious. Whereas now I will gladly just sit and watch Mean Girls 3 times a week, kind of. So actually, I think young adults, they want to be challenged.
Yeah. And I think, do you find writing nonfiction for young adults quite different to writing fiction for them? Because I find like the idea of writing a nonfiction book is so scary. I have no idea how to do that. Do you find there's a lot of difference, or?
I think so. By the time I came to write my first nonfiction, I had done, and increasingly I was doing bits of journalism for Attitude magazine or The Guardian when it was less problematic. And I realised, and it was a key moment when I read Caitlin Moran's How to Be a Woman, that a nonfiction book can sound like you, that it can sound chatty and conversational. It doesn't need to read the way you might imagine nonfiction to be. And so very quickly with my nonfiction, I realized this is just a direct line, and I sort of realized that This Book Is Gay, What's the Tea? Essentially, it's a massively long blog post, like from like a Juno Dawson blog post where it's like, and that's another good thing from the internet, which is we all now have a platform where we can transmit our views or our wisdom. And I guess that's What's the Tea is. It's kind of, it's me, it's in my voice. I don't have to pretend to be a character. I don't have to think, like Alice in Wonderland. She's not me. I mean, we're both trans, but we are very different people. Whereas What's the Tea? It's It's me, it's my voice, like trans elder Juno. Kind of, that's depressing, isn't it? So old.
It is like I'm 30 and it's still like, it is kind of strange to be considered that to some people.
But I think I think trans. So that was our doorbell. That's my new phone arriving. I'm so excited, and that's my dog reacting to the doorbell.
Yes, very good.
1 second. Has my partner gone for it? Prince, thank you. Shush, shush. That's fine. My fiance, I think, is dealing with it. Are you going to stop, please? Thank you. He just sits there and barks, like worst guard dog ever. Like, what's that going to do? Just sitting there yapping.
He'll do something, I'm sure. I'm still thinking.
What was I wittering on about? Oh, dog ears. It's literally dog ears. And I think, and this is something that, you know, I've spoken about a lot while developing Alice for the potential TV adaptation of Wonderland, which is trans youth have to grow up really fast. You know, you're making really significant decisions about your life, about, you know, the way that people are responding to you can be incredibly hostile. So, you know, you have to develop a really thick skin. And so I think that there is a level of maturity to trans and non-binary people anyway. So I think it is a slightly different kettle of fish. Yeah.
And I imagine that there was a lot more that you wanted to put in this book. How did you choose what to put in? And did the manuscript, like, was it kind of always the same length, or did it like fluctuate a lot, or how did it grow or shrink?
So there is a slightly longer version of this book. Some chapters did get trimmed down, which is funny because you always sort of think that publishers are going to want them bigger and bigger, like the bigger the better. But actually, that's not necessarily true at all, actually. And I think especially with this kind of non-fiction, there is a real power in being concise. Certainly the big difference, the key difference between version A and after it had been through one round of edits, I think my anger was more evident in the book. There was a sense of me almost being on the back foot, you know, of like sort of tackling, you know, common transphobic issues in quite a definitive way. I mean, I would almost say there was almost a bitterness in the first, like a hardened quality, because I felt a bit weathered by a storm. You know, things had been really, really bad and getting worse in many ways. And I think that showed. And then I think after a very quick conversation with the editor, Liza, I realised the goal eventually is that we are welcoming young people into a really exciting, diverse community. And not just of trans and non-binary people, but the whole queer community, because I really firmly believe that there is one LGBTQ plus community and that we have far more in common than we have differences. And actually, you know, there is such a safety, literally, there is a safety in lesbians and gay men and bisexual people and trans people and queer people working together for the common good, which is equality, which is just legal recognition, access to healthcare, freedom from discrimination, you know, and that's why, you know, we wanted What's the Tea to be joyous. I think that's a really important word, because at our best, our community is joyous, you know, and when you go to, you know, I'm very lucky I live in Brighton in the UK, which is a very queer city to live in, you know, whether it's Big Pride, we got Big Pride or Trans Pride, you know, they are truly diverse and inclusive events. And, you know, nothing makes my heart soar more than Trans Pride in Brighton, which is Little Pride, and Trans Pride in Brighton, where you see lesbians and gay men and just everybody in that, it's in this tiny little garden, and just everybody kind of just hanging out, eating their falafel, and it's really wonderful. And we want this book to be like a portal to the joy of queerness, not a shield against transphobia.
Yeah, I definitely think it is that. That's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to use that again. This is my first What's the Tea event, so I'm almost like,
wow.
That's quite spicy quote. I'm going to have that one. It's a portal. It's a portal to joy. Emily, you're on the line. Can you write that down? Thank you.
Speaking of joy, can we briefly, if you don't mind, talk about your wedding plans? Do you have a song or a special moment that you are really excited to have?
Do you know, at this stage, I will just be delighted, and I mean sheer delight, if I can have 50, oh, sorry, that's so rude, I left my phone on. I will be delighted if I can have 50 of my friends in one room, vaccinated, not having to wear masks and dancing. And I know me and my partner have slightly different visions, I guess, for the day. You know, kind of Max is looking forward to kind of, I guess, the symbolic and ceremonial part, you know, the whole becoming husband and wife. Whereas I see it as, especially after the year that we've had, just the most fantastic celebration of our love with our friends and family. You know, it's kind of almost inviting our friends and family into our joy, kind of. And for us to do that, I need music and dancing and food. And of course, at the moment, I don't know when we're going to be able to do that. Which is really frustrating. At the moment in the UK, getting married would be illegal. So you literally, you can only get married in the UK at the moment if you're at death's door. So that's really encouraging. But we'll see. It's still 6 months away. So let's see. Anything can and will, I'm sure, happen in the next 6 months. So
yeah, I really hope that happens. Because that sounds like exactly what you need, I think.
I just want to dance to Girls Aloud with my friends. I don't know, did Girls Aloud make much of a cultural impact in Australia? It feels like they should have. They were an early noughties British girl group, and that was like my key like teenage pop obsession after the Spice Girls kind of. So yeah, I just want to dance with my friends to Girls Aloud. I mean, how hard can it be? Come on, everyone, let's get those vaccines. Yeah. Let's do it.
And we've only got a little bit of time left, so I might just talk about some books. What were some of your most influential books, do you think?
I mean, it sounds so predictable, but the one I do keep coming back to is Tales of the City by Armistead Marpin. And you know, I'm interviewing Armistead next week, which I'm so scared of. You know, it's good news because they say don't meet your idols, but Armistead Marpin is genuinely one of the loveliest people in the world. And you know, as he approaches kind of his, I think he's just turned 70 or is just about to turn 80. It's one of the big milestone birthdays. Yeah. You know, he is still so open and curious about the world and about queerness and about love. And I think that's really exciting. But more than anything as well, you know, he was doing a trans character 40 years ago, you know, spoilers, Anna Madrigal is trans. And you know, this idea that being trans is in some way new or like a social contagion, like Tales of the City started in 1978. I mean, let's be very clear on that. And they're, you know, the main, or one of the main characters is a transgender woman who transitioned in like the 1960s. So it's, you know, we were always there, you know, and if you look in literature, if you look in fiction, and if you look in historical documentation, trans people were always there. But I think, you know, with Tales of the City, there is that sense of found family or logical family. And I think that's something that every queer person really aspires to, which is finding their little tribe.
Yeah, it's so wonderful when you can find your people. Are you reading anything at the moment, or are you reading Tales of the City? Or
do you know, it's so funny because I will say this, one of the good things to come out of lockdown has been that I have been doing more reading. I'm so clean. All I do is sit in the bath like some sort of crocodile and just read. It's just, I just bathe, I wallow. But at the moment, I'm quite enjoying, and this is in no way disparaging to my YA contemporaries, but I'm just really enjoying not reading YA, having read nothing but young adult fiction for the best part of a decade. I'm really enjoying reading sort of thrillers. And this year I've read some really amazing non-fiction as well. I've just read a book called The Five by, I think it's Hayley Rubenfield, about the 5 victims of Jack the Ripper, but their deaths are not mentioned. So it really is just about the lives and what led them to being in Whitehall in Victorian London. And it's so fascinating. I mean, my gosh. Speaking about, that's the kind of nonfiction I could not do. So I know your limitations. I couldn't write that book. My God, the level of research, it's extraordinary. I'm not a historian, she is, but what an amazing novel. Well, actually, it's not a novel, but it reads like a novel because it feels like you're reading the story of those 5 women. And it's really, really heartbreaking. And it really shines the light as well on a lot of these true crime podcasts, which almost entirely skip over the victims and just focus on the murderers.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you. Okay, my last question. I know you've just had a book come out, but are you working on anything else that you can tell us about?
Well, I can now because we've announced it. So next year is very exciting because I'm making my first foray into adult fiction. This is, I found, like a lot of artists, I found lockdown so numbing creatively. I don't work from home. I never have worked from home since 2013. I've always sought out writing spaces and being around other writers. And so, and it didn't help that there were people all around me saying, oh, well, this isn't going to affect you. You can work from home. And I don't work from home. And I was commissioned to work on a TV script. So I did the script and that was fine. But when it came time to write a new book, I just couldn't. But I did have this sort of burning idea that had been with me for about 2 years. Actually, since I was last in Australia, I came up with this notion when I was last in Melbourne. And it started life, as things often do, start with a tiny little seed. It was Desperate Housewives, but they're witches.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, that's good. And I jotted down, I was in a hotel in Melbourne, and which I think is now being used for quarantine, which is interesting. I was in a very beautiful luxury hotel, and it was quite late one night, probably jet lagged, and I wrote just this first page about this woman who is a vet, and in the middle of the night, she goes to an emergency call, and just as you think she's a vet, she uses witchcraft to heal a horse. And I wrote that about 2 years ago, more now, it was 2018. And I sort of wrote that down and sort of filed it away. And then when lockdown 1 started last March, I sort of got it out again. And then I created this notion of like a national coven, Her Majesty's Royal Coven, which is like an official government body of witches. And something I've never really done. I know, something I've never really done is world build, There is an element of that within that trilogy, the trilogy I made, Clean Meat Market and Wonderland. But there is something so satisfying about building a big fantasy world. And as soon as I came up with the notion of HMRC, this sort of like very bureaucratic organization of witches, I just couldn't stop. I was like, this is what I have to write. And it was all I could write. And, I'm very, very excited to say that it's coming out next year. It will be out with HarperCollins Australia as well. I know, because I spoke to them when we were in the process of finding a home for it. So fingers crossed for you, winter 2022, hopefully I might be able to come over to Australia and meet some readers, because and no spoilers, but there is an Australian coven.
Cool.
It is a global thing, and a part of that is because I've never felt more welcome than the last time I was in Australia. I spent time in Sydney and Melbourne, and I had the best time. So I'm dying to come back.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Juno. Hopefully the next time we speak, it will be in person.
Yay!
It's been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you
Don't
so much
forget
as well.
to get Juno's new book, What's the Tea? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison Evans, for asking those questions that we all wanted the answers to. And Juno, I just want to say to you that when you come back to Melbourne, I'm already imagining quite a big party. I'm already imagining throwing that red carpet down the readings entrance and saying, "Excuse me, everyone, excuse me. We have Juno Dawson in the house." And I think it will be quite tremendous. I think we could have a lot of fun. But for now, can I just say, on behalf of Readings, thank you, Alison. Thank you, Juno, for being with us today. And to you, Juno, wishing you and your country so much happiness, so much safety, so much calmness. We're all watching, and our hearts go out to all of you.
Thank you so much.
But thank you for joining us tonight.